Good afternoon, everyone. It is time for another episode of Get to Know Her, and today is going to be an exciting one. We're talking about menopause. That's right. Husbands, I need you to listen as well. It's good to be educated on this stuff. So, before I introduce our most amazing guest, I have to share with you. You know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about my outfit. I'm going to talk about my jewels, and I'm going to talk about the coupon code that you will use on Brenda Bedome's website when you shop. But what I need you to do right now is to write it down, because I have a little surprise for you. You're going to be able to use that coupon code somewhere else. So the coupon code, let's start with that. It is Get to Know Her. GETKNOWTOHER. Okay, so write it down because you're going to need it later. Moving on to my outfit, Brenda Bedome has outdone herself once again. I'm wearing this lovely blue top and a lovely jacket. I'm just going to stand up here. I wanted to show you the top. There's like so much room to move for extra treats if you like. And the jacket's great with the little button detail. I totally love this. Super comfy, feeling dressed up, but also feeling very relaxed and chilled out. The jewels today, of course, glam jewels. This is a new style. I want you to look at this on our website. It's a 5-strand and it's got multiple chains and beads. And then I'm wearing it with our sparkle drop earrings, which we just launched just last week to our subscribers, and a little coordinating bracelet, of course. It's all there, you guys. So get yourself ready for spring, shop for some clothes, shop for some jewels. Use the coupon code Get to Know Her on Brenda's site, but keep it close because you're going to need it for something else. Now, I would like to introduce my guest to you. Today, you are going to meet Cathy Rust. In 2020, instead of exploring a dream of early retirement, Cathy founded a business to help women who suffer from night sweats to sleep more comfortably. At this stage in her life, she was 57 years old, and she was thinking the smart thing to do would be to retire, like many of her friends were doing, and start to tick off those items on her very long bucket list. In January 2020, her job ended with a small management consulting firm where she had worked part-time for 4 years. The rest of her work time was spent writing and managing a green building materials blog to help consumers find better building materials. When the blog was successful within its space, it was a lot of work for her with little financial gain. Since her paying job had ended, she wondered if maybe it was time to fold the green building website too and just retire. The thought of pounding the pavement again was unappealing, and frankly, she was self-conscious about her age. She was debating what to do when COVID hit. All plans and decisions were put on hold. Like many, she spent hours online, obsessed with COVID cases all around the world, when she came upon a course to teach you how to build an e-commerce business. Yes! One of the things on her bucket list was running her own company. Over her working career, she'd been involved with several startup companies and watched with awe and admiration as founders went through good times and rough times on their business journey. Some of those businesses did not succeed, but some of them succeeded wildly. Bit by bit, she gathered information and experience from these businesses and founders, and between that and the e-commerce course, she decided retirement could wait. I love this. With enthusiasm, wisdom, and the e-commerce course, she plunged into the program, soaking up everything she could about running a business. At the same time, in the back of her mind, she kept saying, "Are you sure you want to be starting a business at your age?" Cathy pushed self-doubt aside, continued with the program, and founded Cool Your Sweats in May 2020. With the incredible support of her husband and their 3 children and no apparel experience whatsoever, she used her green building and building science knowledge to approach night sweats in a different way than the other companies were doing it. She is now living out one of her dreams of running a business. Retirement and travel to wine countries will have to wait as she navigates product design through to sales and everything in between, staying true to her mission to help hot and sweaty women sleep more comfortably. Cathy spends her time between Montreal, Quebec, and Collingwood, Ontario, with her husband and their agoraphobic 17-year-old cat, Rebecca. Cathy has a BSc in biology from McGill and a master's in environmental policy from the University of Toronto. Cathy is proof there is nothing we can't figure out at any age. Before I bring Cathy on, you wrote that coupon code down. Now you're going to write down this. You're going to write down coolyoursweats.com. And Cathy is giving us 10% off when we use the coupon code Get to Know Her on her website. So you're going to want to do that after you hear about Cool Your Sweats. Let's bring Cathy on now. Here she comes.
Hi, Monica.
Cathy, hi. This is so great.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And I love your bio. I just love that you're addressing the whole age issue. And I do have to share something with you. I'm not sure if you know our mayor of, well, she's not anymore, but we had a mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion. Do you know her?
Oh, yeah. I'm a Torontonian. So we just moved to Montreal 10 years ago.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so you know all about Hazel. So she, I think she just turned 101 or...
Unbelievable.
Anyway, and she just signed a 3-year contract to continue her work on the board for Lester B. Pearson Airport or something. I don't know exactly the details. Don't quote me on that, but she signed at over 100. She signed a 3-year contract for a work commitment. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So you know what? You are so inspiring because I often think about like retirement, really. I mean, I live and breathe for my business. How could I ever shut it off? And we don't have to.
Yeah. Age is just a number. So
exactly.
It does get into your head sometimes, right? But you have to push that aside and say, this is what I want to do. And you only live once. And it doesn't matter how old you are. But if you don't start now, it's one less day.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Great. So Cathy, we all want to know what little Cathy wanted to be when she grew up.
Oh, that was easy. I wanted to be an architect. So from a very young age, I wanted to be an architect all the way through. I was actually accepted into architecture school at University of Waterloo. And I had to choose between going into civil engineering at McGill or going into architecture at Waterloo. And this was 1982 in the height of the recession with massive interest rates soaring high. And I debated which one to go into because if I went into civil engineering at McGill, I had to apply after that first year into architecture there. So, it's one of those bird in the hand at Waterloo or take your chances at McGill. And in the end, the reason I told everybody I didn't go to Waterloo was because I didn't want to be stuck designing Viceroy A-frame homes for the rest of my life. If anybody remembers the Viceroy A-frame homes, that's not the reason. That I was basically terrified. So I didn't think I'd be good enough. So I didn't go. And I went into civil engineering. I thought, okay, this will give me a year and I'll try again in a year's time. And unfortunately for me, my marks dropped in first year engineering. It's not a huge surprise. And I didn't get in for year 2 into architecture. So by then I had to say, okay, what am I going to do? Because that was my only plan. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't ever think I wouldn't get in.
And how old?
This time I was 19. So, because I went to grade 13 in Toronto, and then so I would have been 20 by the time I was applying again for the fall of year 2. And I still thought, oh, maybe I can do it, maybe I can. And when I didn't get in, I had to look around and say, all right, I've got to graduate from university. What do I like? And eventually I decided that I really liked genetics. I thought genetics was really fun. That was one of my favorite biology courses in high school. And so I finished with an undergrad in biology, specializing in human genetics. And then I had to decide what the heck I was going to do. So, when you have one goal and that goal is architecture and you don't have a plan B, life becomes very fuzzy after that. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you kind of do a lot of job hopping. So I job hopped for 4 more years trying to figure out what am I doing? What am I going to do? And
I wanted to ask you, did you feel a lot of pressure on yourself, like from parents, or it was all internal, kind of like, oh my God, I got to figure this out? I'm just thinking back, back to that age of being 19, 20, and there's, lots of women that age, even younger, who are experiencing that now because they finish high school so much earlier than we did. So I can imagine it would be a tremendous stressor on you to have has spent all those years thinking, well, I'm going to be an architect. That's what I've always wanted. And, coming to that realization that that's not where you're headed.
No, it was really tough because I didn't have a plan B. And even then, so over the next 4 years, and the other thing is you compare yourself to your friends and your family, and they're all getting on with their lives. And I'm working as a list broker in a mailing list company. And it was not exciting work because you're just buying mailing lists on behalf of other companies. And I thought, and I'm the kind of person, a lot of people are really good. They can say, okay, I'm doing this to earn money and I can do what I really want to do in my part-time. I wasn't like that. I had to really feel good about what I did. And it's not that I didn't feel good. In fact, the company I worked for, I really liked the people. I liked going to work. I liked being around them. What I didn't like was my actual job. And it was very difficult for me to do. I'd be in tears sometimes. And even now looking back, it's like, oh my God, what a drama queen. But, it was just not something I could see myself doing long term. But the problem is I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I took the MCAT, I took the LSAT, I took the GMAT, and I took the GRE. And so I'd go to parties and people would say, oh, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I'm a professional writer. And they'd say, what? And I'd say, I've written all 4 entrance tests to see which one I liked. So,
wow. Good for you.
Yeah, well, we're dumb. Like, you sort of have to say, wow, you really did not know what you wanted to do. The evidence is I clearly wanted to go back and do another education degree.
Right.
Just the fact that I'm writing all those tests says, it looks like you want to go back to school. So what do you want to do? And by then I decided, architecture was out of the question, even though I still looked at it fondly. I just thought, do I really want to go back and do an undergraduate degree? It's 5 more years out of my life, be massively in debt. It wasn't something I really wanted at that point. So anyway, yeah. And finally, I decided that it was the hottest year on record in 1988. And I decided I have to go back to school. I've got to do something environmental. And so that was when I went back and I found a program at U of T because we lived at Spadina and St. Clair. By then I was married. And so I went back and I did this degree in environmental studies and political science. And most of my friends said, you're doing it in what? In environmental study, environmental policy? What is that? And so, I did it and I tried to explain to people why I was doing it. And most people just shook their heads and didn't get it. And anyway, yeah.
Gosh, and do you remember back then? Because I remember back then too, people weren't really talking about the environment, or we weren't having the conversations we're having today. So what was top of mind for you back then, like in terms of what was happening with the world?
Well, that's a good question. I kind of remember the moment that I made that decision about what what field do I want to study and what do I want to do? And that was, my husband and I had gone out to, 1980, we weren't married. We got married in 89, but we went out to visit friends of ours who were doing postdocs at Stanford. So we were visiting there. We were traveling up and down the East Coast or the West Coast of California. And it was the hottest year on record. It was also the year and the time that Gretzky had been traded to the LA Kings. So I remember that really well. And they were talking about increasing number of forest fires. And we're in the middle of a California forest. And it was so beautiful. And I just thought, and I'd grown up in Muskoka and Georgian Bay. I went to camp in Georgian Bay. And I just loved the wilderness and the environment. And I just thought, we have to save this. Like we have to maintain this. It is so beautiful, and I want my children and future generations to enjoy this land because it's just spectacular, and the world is a really beautiful place. So that's kind of, I think it was really just all the time I'd spent outdoors as a kid, and then in 1988 when they said this is the hottest year on record, and I thought, okay, I want to be a part of the change. And so that's how I started. And then I started looking into programs.
Right. God, that's huge. Yeah, I just think that it's so interesting to know what was happening for you at that time, because I remember that summer, but I don't remember thinking something must be wrong. I just thought, oh, wow,
Well, I had a teacher in grade 10 who introduced us to the idea of, it was called global warming when I was in grade 10. And she was the one who talked about global warming. And so I guess I was a highly anxious person growing up. I'm still a little anxious, but I'm not as bad as I was. But that really stuck with me. And she explained, it was in geography, and she explained all about how global warming was supposed to work and what the predictions were by the scientists. And so that was really the thing that triggered it in my mind. And then I just watch it every year and see what was happening. And it became more and more evident by 1988 that, yeah, it was a thing. And it was something that we really needed to reckon with.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. This reminded me of a funny thing I saw on Instagram, and it said, please stop saying they didn't teach us that in high school. You were talking. And sometimes when I hear I was a big talker and also a note writer, and you talk about this, I'm like, was I talking through that? Like, I wonder if my geography teacher actually addressed global warming and I completely missed it. So
yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, like that really stuck with you and scared you a little bit. So
yeah, it scared me a lot. So
yeah, that's great. So Cathy, you worked in this field for how many years until you?
So then it sort of became very eclectic. I'm sure you find it not surprising that it was very difficult to find jobs. Like when I was going for this master's degree, what normally would happen after that is you would go and do a PhD. And there weren't a lot of jobs for environmental policy people in Toronto after I graduated. And so I worked at 2 consulting firms that went out of business after I had joined them. And then at the same time in my personal life, I became pregnant with our first child, and then my husband was transferred down to Mexico City. So it was like, okay, well, let's go to Mexico City because that's something of a lifetime, once in a lifetime opportunity. And so we moved down to Mexico City when I was pregnant with our first child, and then I ended up having our second child there. And we were down there for 2.5 years, 2.5 years, and then moved home, maybe a little longer. And then moved back to Canada in 1998, the beginning of 98. And so then it was time for me to look for a job with my 2 boys. And somebody asked me. Can I
ask you a question before you move on? One thing that strikes me is you had 2 children in Mexico City.
Yes.
So I need to know, were you scared? What was the hospital like?
Yeah, well, I was lucky that no, the hospital was great. It was really,
Okay.
really great. The doctors are all American trained or British trained. Wonderful service, wonderful doctors. In fact, the last night in our hospital, what they do is they bring you a candlelight dinner for two with a bottle of champagne for you and your husband in order to reignite the flame. This is 3 days after you've had birth. Given birth.
Oh my
So, yeah. So I'm not kidding.
God.
That is what happens.
That's a good reason to go to Mexico City to give birth, right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, yeah. Trust me, I did not get that service at Women's College Hospital with my third. So my husband and I are looking around. Where's the candlelight dinner? Where's the champagne and the romantic music? No, none of that. It's like, okay, are you done? Okay, time to go. We got another one coming in. Yeah, complete difference between women's college. Not to say that the actual, giving birth was great, but it's just the aftercare is not quite the same. So anyway, yeah, it was absolutely it was an interesting experience, and living down in Mexico was a really interesting, eye-opening experience. We ended up having a really wonderful time, believe it or not, but there was quite a bit of danger happening all around us. So and the violence was getting worse and worse. And so finally we said, you know what, we have these two beautiful boys. I think it might be time to go home. So that was, as the violence increased, it was really a couple of people. We had most of our friends actually been held up, and we knew of one guy who'd been murdered in a cab. So we thought, you know what, it's time for us to leave.
Oh,
So we came home.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then I started, but I came home at the time. My Spanish was excellent. It's not nearly as good as it used to be, but that's what happens. And we moved home, and there were no Mexicans or people from Latin America living in Toronto at all. So I didn't have an opportunity really to practice or maintain my Spanish, which was too bad. And now that I live in Montreal, there are tons of people from Venezuela and Colombia and Argentina, and it would be easy to keep it up if I could actually remember it, but I can't. So anyway.
We need champagne to get things going again.
Yeah, exactly. So then I started looking for a job, and unfortunately, again, you really got to think about what you do. So I started looking for a job, and I also started looking for daycare for my two boys. And the jobs that I could get and the daycare costs were basically the same. So I would be working in order to pay the daycare. And I just thought, I have these two beautiful boys. I think I'm just going to wait until they're school aged. And then we're going to think about this again, because I don't, I'm privileged, and we lived a life proportionate to that. We just cut back on everything. And so I stayed home, and I stayed home with the boys for the first, well, it ended up being about 3 years, 5 years with them. And then our daughter came along, and so of course I stayed home with her as well. And it wasn't really until 2005 that I went back to work and worked for my friend who started homestars.com. So she needed a blogger, and she said, Kath, can you come and write our content for us? We're starting a blog. And I said, great, no problem. I'd love to do that. What's a blog? And so I had no idea, because no one knew in 2005 what a blog was. But I learned, and I just had a ball writing about houses. Of course, with my interest in architecture never went away. So I wrote about houses and how people were doing their renovations and the services that they were using. And I kept trying to get everything from an environmental perspective. So how do you do a renovation in a more eco-friendly way? And Nancy Peterson, who's the founder of Homestars, she said, that's great, keep that up. And so I'd look into all of that, but of course I'd have to write. So when I wasn't writing about a home or featuring a home renovation, then I would write about, 5 tips you can make to eliminate vampire power from your home. And so I really started looking into that. And that's what eventually led me to start my own blog on green building materials. Where can you get them? How do you talk to your contractor about them? How much do they cost? And those were all of the things when I was doing a renovation of my house that I had a lot of trouble finding. So I thought, well, yeah, if I'm having trouble finding this, other people must be having trouble finding this too. So I started that. I'd worked for Nancy for about 4 years and finished in 2010, I think. And that's when I started BEC Green. And that one was all about, and it's still up. I haven't maintained it that much lately because I still have in my head, I'm going to go back to it. And if I could clone myself, like my kitten in multiplicity, that's exactly what I would do. I'd go back and I'd have these 2 businesses going. So anyway.
Did you monetizing that blog?
Yeah, I have. And in fact, I have. So right now I had advertising on it, and I don't know why. I work with a company called Ezoic, and they said, your blog, we're just taking it off for a while because Google might find it a problem. So now I have to go back in and I have all these manual things to do, and I just haven't had time. So I thought about that. But to be honest with you, I could never come up with a way to make real income until I started this business. And
Okay.
So only through my current business that I realized how I could actually make money enough for me on the BEC Green side of things. So that it's really interesting, but I love my current business so much because I've met so many amazing people, and I love it when I get thank you letters. It's more interactive, whereas BEC Green isn't interactive. It's all behind the scenes, and you don't talk to anybody. You just provide information. So you don't find out if people like what you're doing or what other people would like to see, and so you don't get enough feedback. Whereas with what I'm doing now, I get great feedback, and positive and negative, and just suggestions. Well, could you do this and could you do that? But the best thing of all about my current business is when I get letters and from my customers who say, "Oh my God, I can finally sleep again," and that's when I get this big smile and I get really happy.
Oh, I love that. Tell us why cool your sweats. Like, where did this idea come from, and why are you so passionate about helping women sleep better in menopause?
So again, personal and professional kind of blended into each other, and a couple of reasons. One is I just had a horrible time through menopause myself. Just was beaten up. I had terrible migraines for 8 years, from about the age of 48 until 56, and they just got worse and worse and worse. And then in about 2016, I was having about, I'm not even exaggerating, 15 a month. So I was working for an insurance company at the time doing some consulting, and I would work 3 days a week, and then I'd be in bed for 4 days a week. And then I'd work for 3 days a week and be in bed for 4 days. It was just awful. Meanwhile, my 3 kids, of course, have to pick the loudest instruments possible to play at their schools. So my oldest son played the drums. My middle son played the electric guitar, bass guitar, and we kept saying, please, could you just play it without the amplifiers? No, I can't hear it if it's not with the amplifiers. And our daughter played the trumpet. So when I'm in bed with my headphones and my eye mask and everything on, just suffering terribly, these 3 instruments would be going. So, oh yeah, it's not their fault, right? It's what they do. It's just, it was pretty bad.
Must have mommy needs a hotel room for 4 days a week.
Yeah, pretty much. So eventually I had a friend who's a doctor who suggested that I take gluten out of my diet and see if that helped. So I did. And it did start to help. And then 3 weeks after, I was feeling great, no headaches. And then 3 weeks later, the magic number for me was always 3 weeks, because as soon as my body had adjusted, it would go back to giving me migraines. So my oldest son played the drums. My middle son played the trumpet. So when I'm in bed with my headphones and my eye mask and everything on, just suffering terribly, these 3 instruments would be going. So, oh yeah, it's not their fault, right? It's what they do. It's just, it was And so then I thought, okay, I'll take dairy out this time. So I took both. So then I thought, all right, it's inflammatory. I'll take dairy out. And I was never one to believe of the gut brain connection until this was all happening to me. And then I really had to start looking at what was causing it because I couldn't function. So in the end, it was dairy and gluten, although I'm back eating dairy now and I don't have a problem anymore. And then the worst one was exercise. I couldn't exercise anymore without causing a migraine. And I know it was awful. That was 2016 was a really, really difficult year because I could barely function. Everything, the estrogen in my body was declining and it was causing all kinds of havoc. And then so from there, I hadn't asked for HRT, for hormone replacement therapy, from my doctor. She already knew about all my migraines. It had never really occurred to either of us that they might be connected to menopause because I'd never learned about menopause. My mother had had a hysterectomy when she was 37, and my grandmother had as well, and they had never gone through what I went through. So I didn't have an idea, and I think the right word might be vain enough not to accept that I was getting older. So I didn't want to learn. I didn't want to know, and I didn't accept that it was probably menopausal symptoms. So, and even in my 40s, I had the perimenopause symptoms of a short temper, flying off the handle, getting mad at my family. And I would take a step back and say, what the heck is going on? They haven't done anything. You're getting mad for no reason. And then one of my other friends said, oh, I'm so irritable, it must be menopause. And I thought, oh, that's what it is. It's the premenopausal symptoms.
Cathy, I don't know if you're in agreement with this, but any woman in your 40s who's watching, or 30s, if you have perimenopause, it is the hell part. Like the menopause, I'm on the menopause side now, and I'm like, this is okay. I can deal with this. Like, yeah, I'm gaining a little bit of weight, but I don't care. I mean, in comparison to what perimenopause and that like false sense of anxiety and paranoia and like all of it, it's all a bunch of bullshit. Like I hated it. It was the worst.
It really threw me for a loop. I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form about what was going to happen to me. And right now I'm talking to a bunch of menopause groups because of my nightgown. And we're all saying, they'll say, well, what if we do this? They'll give me a suggestion, like, because we're all trying to help women. And I said, the problem for me, and I don't know how many other women fall into this, is that I didn't want to know. And I didn't want to accept that I was getting older. And there's a brilliant doctor or psychologist or someone out there right now who is figuring out how to get women in their 30s and 40s to understand that it's not a horrible thing. It is just a natural phase of life. Because even if they teach it to you in high school, you're not going to pay attention. You're not going to listen. I wouldn't have.
No,
so
neither.
I think it's something that somewhere along the way, some kind of group, doctor, whatever, is going to have to try to help women understand that it's there. But even doctors don't always know or understand how significant an effect menopausal symptoms can have on some women, because a lot of women glide right through it. It's the rest of us. Well, I talked to a naturopath, and she said 33%, a third of women glide through it with no symptoms or very, very minor symptoms, but 66% of us go through with pretty severe symptoms. So,
wow. Wouldn't it be wonderful if, at the age of 35, every woman received like a big support document from the doctor and said, welcome to hell, but it's going to be okay. This is what you can expect. Because when you know what you're up against, you don't feel so isolated, right? And like you said, it's so scary. I can totally relate to that. Like your body is aging, but you don't really want to know what's going on. It's not that you have no self-worth or that you believe ignorance is bliss or any of that kind of stuff. It's just that I do want to still look in the mirror and see the 18-year-old girl looking back at me. Like I don't like it when I happen to see my reflection in a mirror and I go, "Oh my God, who's that?" Like, or like I look like my aunt in Germany. No offense, I love my aunts in Germany, but you know what I mean? Like, I yeah, I still want to see the young woman, and that a lot of that has to do with our generation and the way that we were raised, and that supermodels are all that because that's what we were exposed to, and dieting is the what most of us did throughout our whole lives, like on and off the Weight Watchers, which is can take a huge toll on your hormones. And like, there's so many things that we did to ourselves because we strive for this perfect, ideal version of ourselves where we're actually damaging ourselves, right? And yeah, it's really, God.
And we can be pretty hard on ourselves too about what we can do, and you're never good enough, and maybe that's just me, but I set too high a bar, and I'm not very forgiving of myself. And you know what it's like when you, I guess where this took me. So I got out of the migraines, which was awful, and I could feel that I was coming out the other side. I had fewer migraines, and I was about to go on a prophylactic called Aimovig to try that out and see if it would stop my migraines. And my doctor had given me a prescription for it. And then they started to go away, as in I had 4 in a month instead of 15. And then I had 2 in a month instead of 4. And so as they started to wind down, I thought, you know what, I don't think I need this anymore, because once you go below a certain threshold, the prophylactic doesn't work anyway. So I didn't end up using it. And eventually I still get migraines, but I get maybe 6 a year. So once every 2 months, and I know how to handle them. So I'm not in bed anymore. I have a whole routine, and it's all good. And so I thought I was out of the woods. I thought, okay, this is good. I'm good to go. Everything is great. Let's get on with life. I'm coming out of the fog, and my kids are growing up, and I'd like to see more of them and all that sort of stuff. And then in 2017, I started getting night sweats, not hot flashes, just night sweats. So at first I'd get one right when I went to bed and one in the morning. And I called them, oh, they're my waking up and my going to sleep signals. And it was fine. Just those 2, and I could sleep all night. And the later into after menopause I got, the worse they became. And so kind of like the migraines. And then what would happen is I'd have 3 a night, and then that would go on for a few months, and then I'd have 4 a night. And by December 2018, I think that was it. No, it was a little earlier than that. I was flipping my covers on and off all night long, and I couldn't sleep. I was sleep deprived, completely sleep deprived. It was awful.
Cathy, can you explain to everybody the difference between a hot flash and night sweats?
Yeah, sure. So they're actually, it's the same mechanism, hot flash and night sweats. So what happens is, this is my personal experience. You know what's coming on. You just have this sense that you're about to have a hot flash, and then your blood vessels open because your thermostat in your hypothalamus is broken, and your body's saying, oh no, you need to cool down. You need to cool down. Usually that's not the case, but there's been a trigger of some kind, and sometimes there isn't even a trigger. And it says, you need to cool down. Quick, we're going to cool you down. So your blood starts flushing away from your core, which is where this is all happening, because it thinks that it needs to lower your temperature, and you get flushed. So you're very flushed because your blood is being pumped to your surface of your skin, and your sweat glands open. And so when this happens, you get really hot and really sweaty, and so when you are awake, you can take off layers. And that's why the general advice is do wear layers, because when you're in your hot flash phase, because you can take layers off and then you can put them back on, because once the hot flash stops, then your temperature plummets below your normal body temperature and you get chilled. So you need to put your sweater back on, or whatever you were wearing, or your shawl or your scarf. And this cycle is the exact same when you're sleeping. The problem is when you're sleeping is that you're trying to get the 3 different stages of sleep. So you're trying to go into a deep sleep or a REM sleep, rapid eye movement, which is where your dreaming is. And if you can't make those sleep stages, you are not getting a restful sleep and you're going to be a walking zombie. And so what happens is you'll just be drifting into that one of those stages, and a hot flash hits you, or a night sweat, and you burst into heat and sweat. And the only way you can sort of relieve yourself usually is to throw your covers off. But then, and so you start falling asleep again with your covers off, and you get about 3 minutes, or I don't even know how long it is, of respite, and you can just start drifting back to sleep. And then you get cold because your body temperature plummets below your normal body temperature. Plus you have all that sweat on you and that's sticking to your clothes. So you pull your sheets back over you. And this cycle will happen from, as I mentioned, 1-2 nights a week, 1 or 2 times a night, to so frequent that you can't even function the next day. And I got to that level where it was so frequent, I was exhausted. And that will interfere with your current life and your future cognitive abilities. So I saw my mother-in-law, who was brilliant, slowly fade away with dementia. And she did everything right. She was bilingual, French, English. She had several degrees. I think she had 2 master's degrees, 1 in translation and 1 in nutrition. She was a brilliant, brilliant woman. And now, of course, it could have been, there will be a genetic component to that. The only thing that she had a problem with, outside of all the things that they tell you to do, in order to stave off dementia, was she had insomnia. Terrible, terrible insomnia. God. So I had to, first of all, insomnia is really uncomfortable. Like it's such an exhausting experience. I started crying one night going to bed because I knew I was just going to have a terrible night. And I thought, why am I even going to bed? It's so awful when I go to sleep, because you can't sleep. You're just lying there flipping your covers all night long. And I didn't want to be her. I didn't want to go through what she was going through. And I thought, I have to address this because I have to get my sleep back. Mm-hmm. And that was what led me.
I can imagine. I mean, I feel so lucky. I've never had insomnia. I've had maybe a handful of nights where I couldn't sleep, and that was usually because something was making me nervous for the next day. But I do remember it being a lonely feeling. Like I can't. I just felt like this like panic loneliness. It's hard to describe. And I guess because, it's nighttime, other people are sleeping. It's like everything is shut down and you're so wired and you know what's coming the next day.
Yeah. And your thoughts take over. And they're usually at that time of night very negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. So a negative thought, and then anxiety, and then another negative thought, and then more anxiety. And then that just keeps your head going. And so even if you didn't have night sweats, now you're getting into insomnia and your head is keeping you awake. And it's just a horrific overall experience. And you're sweating and you're all clammy. And so, this was all happening. I tried HRT. This was the time when I tried HRT because my doctor had said to me, well, it can help you with night sweats. So, because I'd finally gone to her and said, I'm exhausted, I don't know what to do. And so she said, well, it can help you with night sweats. So I started taking it, and it worked for about 3 months, and I got my sleep back and I felt pretty good. It wasn't 100%, but my night sweats went from every 15 minutes down to like 3 a night. And so 3 a night I could deal with. Unfortunately, right. I also got the migraines came back.
Oh, God.
I know. I know. I can't win. I can't win. So,
Okay, and Cathy, just for anybody who may not know, HRT is hormone replacement therapy, and so your doctor assesses your hormones and whatever wherever there's an imbalance. If you need a little more estrogen, they give you some more. Is that basically how it works?
it is sort of how it works, but you always take estrogen and progesterone together. You don't have to take estrogen. There's a whole study. It's actually all on my blog, on the Cool Your Sweats blog. I've written a lot about it because I've interviewed some really great people who know this stuff. I'm not knowledgeable in that area. I just read what other people write. And then I interviewed a couple of people, but basically, you can take progesterone on its own. When you take estrogen, they highly recommend that you take progesterone with it because the combination works best and prevents cancers and I think heart disease as well. Don't quote me on that. That's my understanding. So that's why you do both at the same time. And then there are optional ways of taking it, whether it's on the skin so that you use bioidentical hormones or by the mouth or vaginally. There are tons of different ways to be able to take all these different hormones now. And for a lot of women, I've talked to a ton of women who say, oh my God, I am so much of a better person now that I'm on these, because estrogen is so important to our bodies. It's amazing how important estrogen is to us. And so as the estrogen declines, that's why we see so many differences in our, not just our appearance, our cognitive abilities, our hearts and heart health, all kinds of things. So yeah, I didn't know any of this either. I knew none of this.
So tell me, like, as far as people say to include flaxseed with your breakfast or so, does that really work?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not a nutritionist, so you have to take anything I say as just a local person who's read some stuff. So so flaxseed is actually supposed to be really good for, especially for women, because it's like a phyto estrogen. So it can help take the place of estrogen, but flaxseed is also great for the digestion. So it performs a lot. So if you can do a tablespoon of flaxseed in your smoothie in the morning, you can't hurt yourself in any way taking something like that. So I mean, that's what I've read. I've read The Wisdom of Menopause is a really great reference book for women who are out there. You don't have to read it cover to cover. You just go to the issue that you might be having. And I've used that one. And then the other one I've referred to and read a lot is Why We Sleep by Matthew, I've forgotten his last name, but it's called Why We Sleep. And he is a sleep scientist. The only thing I noticed is that the sleep scientists they do all of their experiments on young, healthy women and men who are in their 20s. So it doesn't help the rest of us who are the actual sufferers later in life. And the other thing that is a misnomer is that we can survive on less sleep as we age. And it turns out that we still need 7 to 9 hours. We shouldn't be getting any more than 9 hours, but we also shouldn't be getting any less than 7 hours. So somewhere in there is our sweet spot. And frankly, right now I'm getting about 6 and almost 7 hours, maybe 6.5. And I'm really working on getting my sleep levels up as well. And so it's a really interesting thing, because I used to sleep 9 hours, no problem, every night, not a problem. Yeah. So, but the night sweats are gone. And what I didn't know, again, you learn all this stuff when you're forced to learn it, as in, if I don't figure out how to stop this insomnia, I am going to go crazy. Night sweats, menopausal night sweats, have triggers in your lifestyle and in your room environment. And I didn't know that. And my doctor said, oh yeah, there's lots of triggers. Why don't you keep a night sweats journal the way you did for your migraines? Because she knows me that well. She knows of course, all my history. And I said, oh, okay. So I started reading about all the different potential triggers. And I found out, oh yeah, there are a ton of lifestyle triggers that can trigger your night sweats and make them worse. So while I'm starting to track all of my night sweats, I'm also looking at different fabrics, because I'd just been to a green building show and was learning about the different materials that can actually monitor room temperatures. So natural building materials like clay and straw and hemp actually help moderate a room's temperature and humidity. They absorb heat and they absorb humidity when the room is too hot or humid, and then they release it, and this is all within maybe a smaller temperature and humidity window, but they release it back to the room when the room needs it. And it's just a natural way of doing things, but this is all done without fancy air conditioning equipment or heating equipment or materials. And the ancient old-fashioned pre-technology societies were using these materials for years. So I started thinking, well, if these materials can do it for rooms, maybe there's one of those materials that can do it for humans, and we can wear them instead of not wearing them, or instead of having to flip covers on and off. So I started looking for a fabric, and one of the materials I'd come across was hemp, because hemp is used in a lot of building materials, and we grow it in Canada. And so because of that, I thought, you know what, I'm pretty sure I'd read somewhere that you could make fabric out of it. So I started doing my research, and I found, in fact, hemp is made into fabrics. So then, and this is all to find a nightgown for myself, I started looking for, all I wanted was one simple nightgown made out of hemp so that I could sleep better, because I tried cotton, I tried bamboo viscose, I tried all these other fabrics, and nothing worked. And I thought, I know this is going to work. And I couldn't find one. I couldn't believe I couldn't find one, but I couldn't find one. And I thought, if I'm having this much trouble sleeping and no one's offering this product, there have to be other women who are suffering the way I am suffering. There has to be something to do. So that line of thinking, along with this e-commerce course that I just finished taking, sort of blended together, and that was how Cool Your Sweats was born. But it was born as Partridge Berry, which is why all of my labels, it's like the house label right now. Partridge Berry is the name on the nightgown itself, but Cool Your Sweats is the website. So that's the long-winded, very long, boring story.
No, that's
Cool Your Sweats.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about your clients and what they're saying about Cool Your Sweats and how it's changed things for them. Because, a lot of women too wouldn't have the insight that you had to even search for the hemp,
Right.
fabric. It's sort of like, well, my mom had night sweats, my grandmother had, like, this is just something I have to live with.
Yeah.
And to hear that, no, actually, we don't have to live with it. We can sleep in something that will help us make it through the night without waking up, or,
Yeah.
it's great. So yeah, share with us a little bit about your customers. I'm curious to know what they're saying, because
So yeah, it's really interesting. Of course, it's not. So there are two parts to it. One, I wanted to be more than just a company that sells nightgowns. I wanted to be a company that is environmental and has mission and values similar to my own, of course. And so the company only uses non-synthetic, non-petroleum-based fabrics. So there's no polyester, there's no nylon, there's no spandex, there's no elastane, which are all polyester derivatives, oil derivatives. So that was number one. And we have so many clothes in this environment. It's kind of like, should I really be starting a fashion company or a clothing company when we're already clogging the world with all of these fabrics right now, and clothes that are going straight into the dumpster? So I really had to think about it. But in the end, I thought, okay, if women can sleep better, then women can function better, and then women can solve the problems of the world. So my job is to help them be their better selves so they can actually go out and do what they do.
Cathy, I love that.
And so
I just want you to picture something for a second here, okay? Without you and this amazing sleepwear that you've created, women are irritable, they're not getting their night's rest, they're not functioning out well at work, which also means that, let's say they're in the position you and I were in, where we're working full-time jobs, they don't even have the capacity to have a dream on the side to create something new, to bring. So, and here you are, just with a simple 8 hours sleep. Yeah. The world will change.
That's exactly right.
Dormant.
Exactly. And so I wanted to help women get their sleep back, because as you say, you're a human being again. Like, I had to stop all of my activities outside of the necessary ones when I was so sleep deprived. I stopped my exercise activities, I stopped socializing, I stopped volunteering, because just getting from A to B to the finish line every day was my goal. And so then, as I started using my Night Sweats journal to sort of track what was going on, and I noticed, okay, this is good. Now that I'm tracking, I can see that I would drink chamomile tea right before I went to bed, and that was causing a massive night sweat. So I took the chamomile tea out and I moved it to 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. And it was little tiny triggers like that. I changed our sheets to something breathable. And I write about all of this because I offer the journal on the website as it's sort of as a companion, and it's actually being redone right now, but it's now coming. I hadn't done it before, but in future, the Night Sweats journal will always come with the nightgown or whatever sleepwear we have available. And that's so that women can track their triggers and just use it as a frame of reference, so that they can really understand why they're getting the night sweats and what they can do about them. Because surprisingly, you do have more control over them than you think. And so for some women, all they need is the nightgown. And their night sweats are in the perfect sweet spot where they're enough to make them sleep deprived, but they're not so awful that they're still waking up completely soaked and have to change. And so what that means is their night sweats curves are going like this, and the nightgown will actually just make them more gentle. So they'll still feel, their body may still feel the heat coming on, but it'll all be absorbed by the hemp part of the nightgown, and then the rest will transpire through the nightgown. So it's really important that you have sheets that are really breathable. And little tip here, you want actually low thread count cotton sheets or linen sheets. You don't want high thread count, because the high thread count actually holds in all the heat and all the moisture. So low thread count is better in your sheets.
Wow, that's a good tip. Also, Cathy, are there like a handful of triggers that kind of apply to everybody? Like even what you're just saying about chamomile tea, I was thinking, because I usually have a chai tea with some oat milk, and I have chamomile tea in the cupboard. I was like, you should start drinking that before bed, but now I'm like, maybe not.
Well, it's actually just the hot liquid. So if you're drinking tea and you have no problems, it's not a trigger for you. Okay. And to be honest with you, there is no one trigger that all women have. There are triggers that are more common with some women than with others. And so the common triggers are, of course, smoking is number one, and then caffeine and alcohol are also triggers. And what's another one? Spicy food is a trigger. A heavy meal at dinner is a trigger, because then your digestive system is working overtime. But also stress is a trigger, and anything that will get your parasympathetic nervous system going. So you're thinking all the time, and then your heart starts racing, and then your body starts heating up. Your mental awareness is really important to helping to calm everything down. So yeah, even though a good nighttime routine is important and is not 100% related to night sweats, the more you can do to just ensure that you have a good nighttime routine in general, the less likely you will have a night sweat trigger. That's kind of. But so I just encourage people with alcohol, well, you'll have to become a day drinker in order to have a good sleep, because you really shouldn't have a glass of wine after about 7 in the evening.
Yeah.
But don't become a day drinker. That's not a good idea.
Vodka on the oatmeal in the morning. Not a good idea.
Exactly.
So Cathy, I want my last question to you, and you've provided, I'm just so excited because there's so much here. We could talk for hours, but
Yeah.
I want to ask you, for all the women who are now, now they're going to get lots of sleep, which is great. And the women who want to change the world, maybe they're in a job that they've been in for years and, and they want to try something different, or they're like you where they're close to retirement, but they don't see slowing down anytime soon. And they still feel that they have purpose and they want to make a difference in the world. Do you have any regrets or is there anything you want to share with
for me, it's interesting because there are pros and cons to starting a business after 55, let's say, or in your 50s. And one is you really do have a timeline. So you've got to take it seriously. But I have a personality that couldn't have handled running my own business at a younger age. First of all, I was really hands-on with my kids, and so that commanded quite a bit of time. So between looking after the kids and the part-time work that I did, there wasn't really a lot of extra time to start thinking about starting a business. But for me, a friend of mine says, Kath, you have the skin of an onion, meaning that I'm very, very sensitive. And I'm less so now, and I can handle any suggestions, feedback, whatever you want to call it, much better than I could when I was younger. And so I think that makes me more likely to be able to move onwards and realize that, the majority of people out there are actually really kind, and any criticism or suggestions or feedback is meant to help you. And I'm not sure I really understood that when I was younger. So for me personally, starting it now is better for me. But I know a lot of people, they're just amazing right from the get-go, and they know that, they can start a business when they're younger. But the other thing I've noticed is I've gained a lot of experience from what other people have, maybe when they've had missteps in their own businesses when I've worked for them in the past. And so, I've got this note to self, don't do this, note to self, don't do that. But that has not stopped me from making a bazillion mistakes along the way. And so you kind of have to cut yourself some slack when you're starting and say, yep, I'm going to make mistakes. Yep, I'm going to spend money where I shouldn't spend money. And that is a part of life. So I'm a little bit easier on myself in terms of making mistakes and realizing, yeah, it's going to happen. And to be honest with you, you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So as long as I don't keep making the same mistake twice, then it's good progress. And then I guess the last thing that I've learned is when you start it later in life, we have a bit of a nest egg. So it's been, I don't have to stress too much. I still stress about the investment, the significant investment that I've made, but I don't stress as much as I would have if I were younger and starting it with a family and maybe not being able to dedicate 100% of my time and attention. Our kids are out of the house now, and they're independent. And so I feel like I can dedicate both time and resources to the business. And I have a really supportive family. My husband and my kids have just been great. So all of that has been great. Oh, and then listening to podcasts. So you have a great, well, I call yours a podcast, but you have a great talk show. And I listen to menopause podcasts to learn. And then I listen to business podcasts to learn about other founders' failures. And it's all of those different podcasts, I'm just sort of chalking up, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. So
what are some to listen to if people want to?
For menopause, I listen to She 2.0 with Jackie and Ramona, and I listen to another one called Women in the Middle with Susie Rosenstein. That's a really good one. This is all in addition to yours, Monica. Monica's. of course. And so those are the top 3 menopause and women in midlife that I listen to right now. There's another one that I follow called Womanese, which has got really great information on their blog.
Okay.
They're creating a really interesting app to help women with hot flashes actually control their hot flashes using cognitive behavioral therapy. So their work is really, really interesting. And then on the business side, I love How I Built This. That's a great podcast. And the Shopify Masters podcast is also really good. One is very practical, very sort of deep dive information, very specific. And one is about founders and what they went through when they were starting companies. So those are my 2 favorites.
I love it. Funny, I was going to tell you about a podcast that friends of mine are doing, and just as I was thinking it, my friend Sarah types in here. So Sarah Turrell and her sister Trina Turrell, they were on my show. They have a podcast called Just Push Go, and it is specifically for women in business. Like, don't wait, push go.
Yep. I will start listening to that podcast. Thank you for that information. Yeah, I love listening to podcasts. I've become a total addict.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. So Sarah's just saying, sharing our failures was a big inspiration for creating our small business podcast. We realized that everyone goes through it, so we should talk about it, which is true of everything we've talked about today. Like, we got to talk about the stuff. And there are some words that have come out through the pandemic that I can't stand, like normalize, onboarding, pivoting, but what I want to say is we need to normalize, right? Like, there is no other word.
It's funny because I've always, as I've mentioned, I've been involved in a couple of startups in the past. And the one thing when we were going to look for information on certain industries, we could never find the failures. We could only find the successes. And we really wanted to find what hadn't worked, but you can't find those people. They don't come out of the woodwork very easily. And they're the ones who are interesting. Of course, the successes are too. We want to learn from them, but the failures to me are just as interesting and important as the successes. And you have to stop thinking of failure as failure. It's a learning process, and that is a better way of looking at it. In my case, it's more about mistakes. Okay, this one didn't work, and so I like to now frame it as hypotheses. Is this going to work? Okay, or is this going to work, or whatever. And also, working as a single founder as opposed to in a partnership has pros and cons. You get to make all the decisions, but at the same time, you get to shoulder all the burden of failure, and you don't have anyone to bounce your ideas off of. So you just kind of got to put it out there and see if what you're thinking is going to work. So, pros and cons, and it's interesting.
So true. I love you articulated your with the failures being so interesting, because one of the reasons I started my talk show was because when I was coming up in my business, the only stories that were out there, like you say, are these big success stories. But then what happens is these people become so unrelatable that living day-to-day life, I was like kind of comparing myself, like, well, those people don't live like me, so how can I ever be that? Or, and so when I started this show, I thought, we need to talk about our life, like what's going on every day, like you sharing with us, like I had 2 babies in Mexico City, and I was busy taking care of my kids, and I had, like the skin of an onion, like I didn't have the strength or not the strength, but you didn't have the wherewithal at the time to do this. And that's just the point. It's not that you weren't good enough or you weren't capable of, you were directing your energy in other areas. And let's face it, we're all put on this earth for a purpose, and we're not all meant to do the same things at the same time. It would be a boring world. Some people are meant to start a business over 50. Some people, look at Grandma Moses. She was 80 when she started painting. Hazel McCallion is 101 years old, and she's rocking it out with her 3-year contract. Like, everybody, the stories of life are beautiful stories, and I don't want anybody to ever feel ashamed that they're not where they should be, because so-and-so is. And even going back to what you were talking about, like, I loved your story about, setting out to be an architect. Like, that's a big deal. That was a dream you had from a little girl onwards. And I remember being 20 years old and not having everything figured out and thinking, well, that's it for me. I'm just going to be a loser for life. Like, I feel like now looking back at 20, it's like, oh, for God's sakes, I could have rocked it out not knowing until whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the exploration and the adventure that makes life rich.
And, maybe it's because my own personal experience, but with my own children, it's like, whatever you choose now doesn't have to be your lifelong career. It is something for the time being. Cut yourself some slack. Just enjoy what you're doing. Make sure that you can earn a living at it, and just do that. And that, I kind of do a bless and release. I love my children. It's their lives. They have their own lives. We're here to support them and guide them when they need it. But they should be able to do what they want to do and not what I tell them to do. And that sort of giving myself that release, so that, it's their lives. I'm there. I'll be, if they have questions or whatever, which, they never have questions for their parents. But I know what I'm doing, Mom. Okay. So, other than that, it's kind of, it's great to see what they're doing, and it's really exciting to see what they're doing, and I can enjoy what their chosen paths, because they're not mine, and they're going off in totally different directions. It's great. It's nice to see what they're doing. So it's a lot different these days than when we were growing up, where we were told you have to be an accountant, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be whatever. And they don't have to do that. They can kind of job hop and career hop and change, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. Again, going back to Instagram, there's so many fun little videos on there where they'll show like a Gen X person going for a job interview as opposed in comparison to a Gen Z, and it's like our generation, like, yes, and I'll be in a half an hour early, and no, I don't need any holidays for the first year. No, that's fine. And then the Gen Z's like, so what day did you want me to start? Because I'm going to California for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to need 3 days to recover after that before I can start. And they're the ones that set up the boundaries, not the employer. So anyway, I love that. It's
very funny and so true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Cathy, this was so much fun. I love you. I could keep on talking. This is so great. Thank you very much for coming on today. And thank you for creating that coupon code for everybody.
Oh, not a problem.
Remind them to use again. And it's been so nice talking to you. And congratulations on your business and all of the risks you're taking. I think it's amazing.
You. And same to you on your both your podcast and your jewelry business.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Cathy. All right. I'll be right back to you. I'm going to put you in the virtual green room. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Oh, sorry, Cathy. There you are again. There we go. Sorry, sometimes I click the button a little too fast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, Cathy, CoolYourSweats.com. Check her out. Use the coupon code Get to Know Her. Cathy's giving us 10% off. I think this is an amazing product. We all need to have it. And thanks so much, guys. I love this show. I love having you here. I love these conversations. And it really means a lot to me that you tune in. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, please click the subscribe button. And I think right now we are at 99 subscribers. Do you want to be the 100th? I would sure love that. So if you do, get on there, click the subscribe, and we will see you back here next week. Do not forget to go and shop from our sponsor, brendabadome.com. Use the coupon code Get to Know Her for 22% off of your order. Grab your matching accessories from Glam Jewels. Remember, Mother's Day is coming, and pick out something nice for mom. Maybe get her one of our monthly subscriptions. I'm sure she would enjoy that. Every month for a whole year, she'll know you're thinking about her, sending her lovely jewels. Anyways, take care. Keep on showing the world your sparkle, and thanks for tuning in today. Bye for now.